Thank you for being here, everyone. My name is Ramses. I run roamsec.com, which is a knowledge hub. And today we are doing an interactive session about SmartBlocks. So if you're not familiar with SmartBlocks, I like to call them supercharged interactive Roam templates. So if you are familiar with Roam templates, which is basically just plain text, and you ever wondered, can I automate some things or can I make some things more frictionless? Not with Roam templates, not with the native Roam templates, but you can with SmartBlocks. So that is something we'll be looking at today. Just to be clear, this is not an introduction to Roam SmartBlocks. So if you're completely new to SmartBlocks, this will be interesting for you because I will quickly go through the basic ideas from the SmartBlocks extension, but there's other content that I will link to that is better suited to get started. Today really is about building workflows that you actually want me to build. So we'll be building live and we'll make mistakes. We'll hopefully produce something that you can use, or at least inspire you to get started building your own workflows. And that is also one of the reasons I asked that question during sign up: what workflow do you want to build? So I've noticed in the difference of I would say length of answers that for some people they've already very clearly defined workflows, like even step by step. They know all the inputs and what they want as an output. Those people are like my dream client to work with, but most of the time that is not the case. So for many people I've seen, even though I've called you a little bit out by saying don't half-ass it, please take a few moments to think about what workflow you want to design. For many people, it's just difficult to really think through what goes into a workflow. What is it actually that I want to see as a result? Even that is a challenge for many people. So we'll be spending some time on I would say a workflow to get started with workflows. So I will be having a quick look at this book, Getting Things Done. Just looking at the process that it uses to set up projects, which I think we can also apply to workflow design. And we'll also be looking at a little framework called the 3 S's that a RoamSec member called Hyder came up with, and that basically guides you through thinking about your workflows. So having said that, I don't know if there are any questions. Put them in the chat, unmute yourself, feel free. Again, this is an interactive session. And if there are no questions to get started with, I'll get started just with an overview of SmartBlocks. Shouldn't take too long. So if you're already familiar with them, please bear with me. I think you would have appreciated it if you were a beginner still. All right. So SmartBlocks. SmartBlocks started out as part of an extension called Roam 42. Nowadays, SmartBlocks is a standalone plugin for Roam. It's a JavaScript plugin. Where you can get it, it's from, and I will put it in the chat, from roamjs.com, which is run by David Vargas, who creates like 80% of all the Roam extensions available in the community. And the SmartBlocks are like what makes SmartBlocks smart are the commands. So you can, if you're familiar with programming, you can best compare commands to functions. So they take an input and they produce an output. Basically, that is what a command is. And what is the input? The input is basically some logic. So if you want to look for blocks that were tagged with a specific tag, you want to search your graph for those, you can do that very easily using SmartBlocks because it's basically to automate repetitive actions. So that is what the SmartBlock is for. It has very extensive documentation, which we'll be using. So again, this is the Roam.js site with all the documentation. So if you just go to SmartBlocks, and I'll put this link in the chat as well. The only thing you need to do is to click here, copy extension, go to your Roam/JS page, add this shortcode, or actually you don't have to do it. I've now realized because this does it for you. So basically just paste it in on the Roam/JS page and then click yes, I know what I'm doing to enable it. And make sure to refresh your Roam graph to make sure it's properly loaded. So I'm already running it so we can get started. If you want some more help, I have written an article about basically, I took 5 different workflows and turned them, or templates, and turned them into SmartBlock workflows. And if you're a Roam Stack member, I've done a salon before about using SmartBlocks for journaling. So that's there. All right. So that is if you want to dive into SmartBlocks. But for now, let's dive a little bit in the philosophical side of workflow design, because I've done over 70 one-on-one Roam Stack onboardings, and the number one challenge I've noticed among people is not using the right tools or the right extensions. It's more like, what am I even trying to solve? So most people are aware they need some kind of workflow to do the work that they need to do, but they don't really think about putting the work in that workflow. So I really believe that the first step is to, sorry if this sounds basic, but for me, this is just what I see that most people miss. So they don't really care about workflow design. It's almost like a burden. They just want to have a system, have a complete walkthrough, and then they will go through that system. But everyone's workflows and needs are different. And again, that's why I like this book so much, Getting Things Done, because it's more like a meta framework. It acknowledges that everyone's knowledge work is different, that you cannot really predict what you need to do like 10 steps from now, but you can define one next step. And I think workflow design we should treat it the same way. You cannot design a complete workflow from start to finish if you've never really done the workflow before. So we'll be having a look at what are some ways to get started, but just the first step is to start thinking about workflow design. Why isn't it important? Information overload, needing to learn new skills. Like there's so much new stuff coming to us that we cannot really, at least most knowledge workers cannot really afford to do repetitive work that costs a lot of time. And why would you? Because we have so many automation tools. But again, thinking about workflows, it really starts, or automating workflows really starts with thinking about workflows, thinking about, okay, how do I systematize something? What are the steps that go into a desired result? So I strongly believe that we should all become better at automating stuff. And the first step is just becoming more effective. So becoming better at getting the results that we want, and then becoming more efficient, getting there quicker. So I think those are the most important challenges for most knowledge workers nowadays. And what is really the problem if you don't define a workflow? Well, first of all, that you run the risk of doing repetitive stuff manually. I think that is the biggest danger. I remember before I even got into the programming space, but I was in a technical role, my manager said, "You're clearly not a programmer, because if you were, you would never do the same thing twice manually." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's a good point. But how do I actually get to the point that I don't do the same thing twice manually?" And that takes a programmer's mindset. And I think SmartBlocks and just workflow design helps you to think more programmatically and to just think more in algorithms or just steps in a specific sequence. And once you get there, it becomes easier to just write standard operating procedures that you can then outsource. That is like a first step. But using tools like SmartBlocks, you can also automate many of the steps, but it starts with thinking about the workflow. So many of us, we already have like workflows in our head. Like, I don't know, if you work in sales, you will have a sequence that you go through, for example, to acquire a new lead or to run a first sales meeting. There are like steps that you take. But most of those steps for most knowledge workers are in their heads. So all those SOPs, all those standard operating procedures are often in your head. And the first step is to really get to know your workflow. You need to define it and to get what's in your head out of it. So you need to start defining it. And if you don't define your workflows, if you don't put it on paper, you run the risk of the workflow being incomplete, or maybe even the workflow being too long, that you have too many steps. So without externalizing your workflows, it's very difficult to refine them. So those are the problems with workflow design as I see them. Let's have a peek in the chat. So Hamish says, get your brief sorted before you ask for help. Then Nikki, yes, get clear first and get your steps first before you end your ultimate outcomes. And Nikki shares, well, it's easier said than done for my spaghetti brain. Exactly, for me as well. That's why I believe it should be an iterative process. So a big bang automation is very difficult. And I will show an example of how I've done. Actually, it's in the article that I just linked to. That started out as that SmartBlocks template that I just shared in the chat. It started out as a manual template, but like increasingly, I started to reduce friction. So it became more likely that it was actually going to journal. And that is, that is one of the approaches that I always recommend, to go over it iteratively. All right. So let's continue. And let's have a little exercise to get the thinking juices going. And I want to have a look at two little frameworks to define a workflow. So there's one workflow, which I will call the GTD approach, and then Heider's 3 S's. So the GTD approach is basically answering why, what, and how. So the question is, what is the wanted outcome? So very precisely define for yourself what do I want the result, like the physical result of this series of actions be. In GTD, they take the approach for a project. So when you're defining a project, you go through this process, but like I think you can basically workflows that you do repeatedly, they are like projects, but you're just looking for the same outcome every time. So I think we can use this approach the same way. Then, and this looks really similar, like the second question looks really similar to the first question, but there's an important difference. So what is your wanted outcome? But what does it really look like? So the first step is more like you're trying to visualize in your mind's eye, what does success look like? Like, what do you feel even? So you go to an emotional level instead of just, I deliver to stay with the sales example, I deliver a client proposal within 5 days after the request. Okay, that is a wanted outcome. But what does success look like? Like, what does that client proposal entail? What are like the different components? Try to picture it in your mind. The same way, if you're designing a workflow and maybe you want to create a project template, what, like, if you can let your imagination run loose, what will that template contain? Like, go crazy. Like, slowly you will start to work toward it, but the first step is to just picturing it. And then you go actually to the detail level, to the how. So what are all the steps involved? What's the sequence of the steps? And also, to stay with GTD, what is the first physical action? So first physical action in Rome could be clicking a button. So that could be a first physical action. So I click this button, and then what happens? So that is a good starting point. Another approach to workflow design are the 3 S's. So again, what does success look like? What are all the steps towards success? And what is the sequence of all the steps? For many people, this could be a little bit more challenging than the GTD approach. In my view, the GTD approach is a little bit more specific. But basically, you can answer these questions. Again, picturing what success looks like. Then basically, with the second as a brainstorm, all of the steps that you see. It's basically just grab either a mind map, a piece of paper, or just row, and think of all the different steps that are involved. And then you start to organize those steps. So that is like the last part. And I want to make this a little bit interactive. I want to challenge you to pick one of these frameworks and think of one workflow you've been thinking about. And some of the workflows that people mentioned were like daily automation, which I will show in a bit how you can set that up, daily templates, task management, project management templates, writing workflows. So anything you would like to build, because I'm going to ask you to share some of your wanted workflows, or at least your answers to these questions, and then show you how we can actually turn those into an actual workflow. So I'm first going to challenge you before you get to challenge me by building these workflows. So let's take about 3 minutes. This shouldn't take too long. It doesn't have to be too long. So about 1 minute per question, and I will set a timer. The trick is to just get started very small. Don't make it too big. Speak to many people who have ADHD like me, and like these types of exercises, they can spend hours if we don't look out, because there's always another step to do. The trick is to just get started. And before, I want to hear from you, like a little trick. If you really struggle with this exercise, the little trick is just to get started with manual workflows. So pick something that you do very often. One example that I in my last job that I did that I increasingly automated was running the same report every week. So my manager just wanted to have a very specific report, and as I figured out how to do it better, I started to write down the steps. First, to being able to just outsource that report creation. Then I started to use it myself to refine it before I use my manual steps or list of steps to then try and look for different parts that I could automate. Starting just with sub-processes to automate. So my advice is always to start with a manual process that you do often, especially something that bothers you or that takes too much time. Like there's some kind of pain. Those are always the best projects to get started with learning, because solving your own pains, that will help you push through some other pains. Just knowing that, okay, if I just learn this little bit, I will be able to never having to do this other thing ever again. So for me, that always works. Then create a text template guiding you through the manual steps. So just writing down what you would actually do. That's actually how I write most of my tutorials. Like sometimes I test out a new extension for the first time. I actually just write down what I do, the steps that I do. And then at the end of going through the extension, I have a tutorial. So that is basically my process as well to figure out how to do something. I do that also when I do courses, when I'm trying to figure out a piece of software and someone shows to me all the steps that they're doing in a piece of software to get a specific wanted outcome. I just write down the steps, because then I also have a little SOP to go back to. So I don't need to rewatch the video. I have like a written SOP. So many possibilities to practice this. And then once you've written down, once you've really refined the process, think for each step how you could reduce friction by automating part of the steps. So getting back to the report example. So the ideal workflow with that report would be I download like 1 or 2 raw data files, put it in like a black box, and then I have a finished report. Like that is the ideal situation. How do I get there? I have no idea, because I would have to design that black box. To make my life easier, like I could say, okay, I have these raw data files. Instead of cleaning them up manually, I will set a few rules to then apply to an Excel sheet or whatever that cleans up all the data in a specific format. That is already reducing friction. So that's what I mean with automating sub processes. And then think of the first action you can take to reduce the friction in a step, and then do it. So that is basically from G to D, the first physical action. But anyway, enough talking from my side. I'm really curious what you wrote down answering these questions. So either put it in the chat or unmute yourself and share it with us.
I'll go. I have one that I use on a regular basis. So I use Roam exclusively for note taking, but I use Omnifocus for managing my tasks. And I find myself struggling to, it's not even project management, I guess it kind of is, but task management, and being able to go back and forth and find my notes about a particular project or a particular task in Roam. Omnifocus does allow you to have a notes section, but it sucks. And of course I want the richness of Roam. So I find myself copying links to individual pages in Roam and then putting those in the notes field in Omnifocus. And it's just kind of gross, and I sort of forget to do it. So I have to, it's a broken workflow because those things sort of don't talk to each other.
Yeah, so I think you already have something that is a challenge, letting 2 apps communicate. So SmartBlocks can communicate with apps outside of Roam. To be honest, it's outside of my area of expertise, because you would need to write JavaScript for it. So you would need to get quite deep into it. So it's actually one of the reasons why many people, and I'm not saying you should abandon Omnifocus, but it's the reason why many people also want to do task management in Roam, because then they can actually combine their notes and their to-dos. So maybe an option. So Omnifocus, I think it's a Mac only app. You could use a tool like Hook that would automate some of the things. But to be honest, if that is really your use case, if you're not willing to do your task management in Roam, if you really want to stick with Omnifocus, to be honest, it's outside of the scope of this session, because I really want to focus on SmartBlocks that are like that can use the standard building blocks of SmartBlocks instead of having to write JavaScript, because I couldn't even do it if I wanted to do it right now. I'm not a JavaScript pro.
Sure, makes a lot of sense, and I'm happy to see what other people need to do, and maybe it's something I could actually take out myself, because I am a software engineer. So if I learn something today that I can then leverage, I'll be sure to share it with the community.
Yeah, but I do want to write out your use case, because I think your use case could be useful if you were to use Roam as a task manager. So if you want, we can still go through the steps and define the workflow
Okay,
if
that would be
if you're up
cool.
for it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So I've created this little build area. So there will be there's a little bit of a test data that I will create, and then the workflows, which are the actual template, and then we'll test it out. So taking, I don't know, did you actually write down the steps that you answer these questions? One of these frameworks?
I did, but it was in the context of Omnifocus. So if you want to move on to someone else, I'll sort of reframe it within what it would look like for Rome.
Okay. I still think like retrieving to-dos based on like specific context, I think that is a use case many have. But yeah, if you want, sure. I see Hamish has posted something in the chat. Let's see. I'll read it out loud, and then maybe Hamish, you can give some additional context. Let's see. Oh yeah, and you fill this in the survey as well. I've actually been thinking about this one. It's
because I can't work out how to use block mentions.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was going to do was build queries, so native Rome. So I've tagged everything with social media posts. Yeah. Right. So should bring them up. But I wondered if you can do it with block mentions. And then you get to use the date function, so you can be like this week, next week, next Tuesday, whatever. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. There are some limitations with that, but let's play with it. Let's see. So a workflow that shows me all scheduled social media posts in the graph. So that will be the future, right? Anything that's planned for the future.
Yeah. So the idea is that a different smart block will put them in, and then each week I need to create them. So I need to see which ones are due this week that need creating.
Interesting. Okay. I don't know if we can limit it to next week, but we can definitely look for future blocks. So then the second step would be a template that pulls this into my start for the week tool, which I think I'm going to have to do on Sunday evenings. Yeah. So you want to look 7 days ahead. So it needs to ensure it's either with queries or block mentions to find the post with the date in the next week. Yeah, and that is indeed a very SmartBlocks type thing to do. So let's just define a use case. Let's see, find social media posts scheduled in the future. All right. So let's go through these steps. So what is the wanted outcome? So what do you want it to do? What do you want it to spit out?
I want a simple list with each of the forthcoming days, and then as a child bullet to each day in the list, the post that needs scheduling. So if it's if it's going to be on Instagram and Twitter, then that's already in my social post. That will already be there, but it all comes.
All right. So blocks with social media post tags, I would imagine. They have like a tag. Success would be like have a complete list, have all of your success
arranged in future date order.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, so say
no, it will be possible.
Evening,
yeah.
See the 7 days.
All future posts in a dated order with their child blocks. And then the steps would be, so what are the steps actually? How do you go over getting the information into Rome? So do you add tags? Do you have a template set up? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Hamish, the question was for you. Do you have like
So I've built a a smart block that when I put in a future event date, it automatically goes back 3 weeks, populating the social media posts that need to go in. So, the first one is 3 weeks before the event date, and the template will have it tagged social media post here. So then what I'm going to do is when that comes in.
Is that a page? Is that a page or just a block?
Yeah, it's a tag, so it's a page. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then what I would do once I've scheduled it is I would just run a different template to create the content.
Okay. Template. Another template creates the content or the skeleton, I would say, skeleton for the social media post. What tags do you use?
Well, the literal thing, all it needs to show up is the fact that there's the tag, which is just social media post as a tag, the 3 words.
Okay. So
this is actually really straightforward for the week ahead.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it would just show up that tag on the right day, and then I know to plan for it.
All right, let's just use social media post. So all right, so let's actually get some data for here. So let's just say we create a page. So what would the page name look like normally? So that template creates a page, you say, or does it create a block with child blocks underneath? So does it just create a block, or does it create a page?
It creates a block.
Oh, okay. So the template creates a block for social media posts, and then underneath that block you fire off another template to actually, and then that parent block would have like social media posts. So the data would be, for example, something like this. So this is like test data. It would like look. So let's just assume this is the tag social media post event announcements. I don't know. For a date in the future. So let's say 3 weeks from now. Just pick something, 20th. And then here you would have, if it were like Twitter, you would have tweet 1, tweet 2, tweet 3, something like that. Just very simple.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So let's get started building it. For this, we're going to use the command reference. All right. So here you find basically all of the available commands in SmartBlocks. If anything is unclear, please let me know. I help maintain these docs, so I know sometimes we assume a little bit of knowledge. So just let me know. So the use case here, actually, and just let me write a little bit of pseudocode. What I want is find all blocks in the future tagged with social media posts and show child blocks. I don't know if the second one is possible to do automatically, but we'll see. So the first thing we actually need to do is find all blocks in the future. So we can look for future. And let's see, this is to do future. Could be useful if this were a to do. So if this were a to do. Let's see if there's anything else for the future. To do future DNP. So actually this command looks for all to-dos that are mentioned on a future DNP page, daily notes page. Let's see, what else can we do with future? So these seem to be the options. So as you can see, sometimes you do run into limitations that might make it necessary to adjust your workflow a little bit. So I believe we can get this working. In the case of you, Hamish, you would need to change your template a little bit to include a to-do at the beginning of the parent block. So that is like a little bit of a workaround, but yeah, we can do that. So let's get started writing it. Let's just assume that you will use the to-do future DMP. We're going to use that one. So to create a new workflow, you start by writing hashtag SmartBlock, capital S, capital B, and then the trigger. So just like when you create a Roam slash templates template, the trigger is like the first word or string of words in the block, in the parent block. So in this case, let's call it fetch future social media posts. So what do we actually want to find? So we want to find all blocks. So we need to put in a limit. We need to define an output. So do we want to actually see the block itself, or do we want to see the page where it's mentioned? If you were working with pages, you could use this, or we can show the path, but I think we'll go with the actual block in this case. And then there are some other things we can put in, like, and that is actually something that we will need to do, is we will need to look for social media posts. And actually these work regardless if they are links. So it doesn't have to be tagged with a social media post. So that is also an important difference from queries. With SmartBlocks, you can actually find blocks based on specific words or combination of words in the block, and it doesn't have to be a link. So I see that as a yeah, big advantage over queries. So let's get started. So to do future DNP, let's see. So to get started with a command, you first write I don't know even the word for this character. Let's call it pointy bracket and the percentage sign, and then you get all the options. So we can do block mention, obviously, but we want to only look, we only want to look, so we could say block mention. Hey, I see block mentions dated, by the way, now. Let me search for this. And by the way, if this looks messy, workflow design is messy. This is actually how I work. So block mentions dated purpose returns a list of blocks that mention a page reference based on a specific date range. Maybe we don't need to use it to do dated or future to do. Let's see. So maximum amount of block references to return, page name or tag name. Okay. Start date. I think this is what we need. So scratch the, sorry if this was confusing, but let's scratch the future to do. We're actually going to use this one. So block mentions dated. Let's see. So first, maximum blocks to return, page name or page tag, start date, end date. Then we can sort them, and we can also have the filter, yeah, we can also influence the filtering. Okay, yeah, let's do that. So what I do now, so this is a command, and a command, like I said, it's a function. And what does a function do? It takes in an input and it spits out an output. How do we actually define what to put in? you do that by using arguments. So once and I will show it again, once you've added the command, block mentions dated, just hit enter. I see the instructions again. No, I cannot move this. What I need to do is to enter the arguments, to enter the filter options. I need to hit colon, and then I can put in the different options. So maximum amount of block references to return. Let's keep that to 7, 1 per day. The page name or tag name. So social media posts shouldn't be a tag, because this is already interpreted as a tag. Let's see, start date. Test with, see here, test date. Strange why it says task, but let's just try. So you can do something like today. Okay, so the start date is today. And then the close date is, I don't know. 7 days from now should work, if it supports natural language processing. And then sort order, newest dated blocks to oldest. Let's do descending. And then what else? The format we want to spit it out in, so that is the actual block UD. So we need to put it between parentheses, because it will generate a block reference. And then optional filtering. Nah, we're not going to do that. So if I will look for this block, it will not work, because this is more than 7 days from now.
What's the bit with the UID, Ramses?
Yeah, okay. Let me clarify that once I've set the date. Okay, so with the UID, it's here. So the 6th argument we need to put in with this command is the format we want to spit out the result we want to spit it out in. So either we want all the blocks to actually show the block. So that is what we do now. So we are looking for all blocks that have dimensions, social media posts, that are dated between today and 7 days from now. And we want to only see the block references. So the format we get here is we get 3 options. We get to fetch the UID, so the actual address of the block, so the block reference, the page. So if the block reference is found on a specific page, instead of actually spitting out the block or the block ID, it spits out the page name, or the path. So that is just a string of text showing, okay, these are all the blocks that are like parents of the block that was fetched. And the reason I put this between double parentheses is because that is how you reference a block. So we are going to fetch the block reference and then put it between the parentheses. If we were going to fetch the page name, we wouldn't use the double parentheses, but we would use the double brackets. So we would do this. And then it would spit out the actual page link. But that's not what we're going to do. We're going to get the actual UID. And this should fetch the parent block. So let's just try that out first. Hopefully it works. To fire off a SmartBlock, you type XX. I will show in a little bit, and I realize I should have done that before, but we have some time. How you can change that. And we're going to run fetch future social media posts. So going to run it, and there's only one result. And here we have it. There is obviously a downside to this. It's not fetching this. So a manual action you would need to do is to click apply children, so either as text or as references, and then it pulls in these children. But maybe we can string together a few commands. So let me see if there's something like apply child blocks or something. So let's see, child blocks. So it seems like this will be possible somehow with JavaScript. Let me look for more.
It's not strictly necessary.
Okay, but actually, I know I have some use cases that I can think of myself, so I'm actually going to talk to David to see if he can add it. But yeah, this would basically be it. Just to show that, like, events to announcements, and let's put it in a date way further. It shouldn't fetch it then. So let's say 3 weeks from now. Let's run it again. Yeah, just one block. So this is basically how you would do it. So this is one example. I want to dive into other workflows, but I see that I've been talking way too much, and I still have some other stuff that I need to show. Because some people also ask me about automations, and I want to show you, if you're not familiar with it, the automations. By the way, I will be saving the chat, and I will be going through your workflows, and maybe I will be contacting you for some clarification, because I also want to do some more blog posts where I actually just step-by-step build some of a little bit more generic workflows. So I'm looking at task management. I'm actually writing an article about task management based on the GTD system, but then also with SmartBlocks. And I'm also working on a guide for a writing system. So basically going from capture phase to output phase. So please put your workflow use cases in the chat, because I will definitely get around it sometime. But first, some automations that I want to touch on before we end with Q&A, because I will stick around a little bit longer. And that is the SmartBlocks settings page. So if you go to Roam/ds/SmartBlocks, and I'll put this in the chat. So this page, if you've installed SmartBlocks and refresh your graph, this page will automatically get created. Here you can configure basically how SmartBlocks behave, and you can also set up a very cool automation. Actually, a few automations like keyboard shortcuts, but also daily trigger. And I quickly want to run through it. So the first option you will see is to customize your trigger. If you've just seen before, when I type XX, that is a trigger to trigger SmartBlocks. You can change this to basically anything. I see many people who have it like this, but I like XX. Then you have the custom only. That means that when you write XX, the first things you'll see are your custom workflows, indicated by these colored blocks, but there are also predefined workflows. Like today, I can, when I type today, I can just generate today's date. I can fetch all to-dos for today, etc. So when I have custom only enabled, those predefined workflows are not available. This is not so interesting. The auto hotkey, well, this is really cool. So you can trigger a workflow by typing, but you can actually also define keyboard combinations to trigger a workflow. So maybe you have Command, Control, V, for example, to paste in something from the clipboard in a specific format that you can do from here. Highlighting, I find that very useful because let me open the test area. Now, maybe I need to, yeah, I need to refresh. Just let me refresh. All right, because now it should, yeah. So now it's not very clear, but now you can actually see syntax highlighting. So if you're used to Visual Studio Code, for example, is it called? Yeah. So any IDE, so integrated development environment, any programming environment has syntax highlighting, which shows like the command in this case, dark blue, indicating that it's a correct, it's actually a valid command. Very, very useful when you start to nest commands where you can see, okay, this is where one command starts and this is where it stops. So I highly recommend you enable highlighting. Then daily. So this is basically the daily automation. You need to first enable it, and then you need to define a workflow name. I don't know if I have a daily workflow here. Yeah, actually I do. So this is the daily workflow, which contains 3 buttons to trigger other workflows. So yeah, every day at, I can set here the time, every day at 1 minute past 12, this little workflow will be put on my daily notes page. And what will it look like? Well, basically just like this daily. So this is what I will wake up with. I love to use buttons in daily templates because clicking any of these buttons triggers a workflow. But if I don't trigger it for that day, it's not polluting my daily notes page. For many people, they use a daily structure and then they have subheadings with tags in them. Well, if you don't actually populate those, they just pollute your graph basically. So I can just click this this button and it will be triggered, and now I have this musings link on the page, and I can just start musing here. So this is I see it's still working with the old SmartBlocks version in this case, but this is how I use the daily automation in my personal graph. What else? Yeah, so that is basically it for the automations. All right, 1 minute overtime. Sorry, I do want to go through some of the things in the chat. If you have a question, just speak up as I'm going through the chat.
Ramses, can I ask a quick question? That daily workflow name that you went, oh, I don't know if I have a template. Oh, I have one daily. Was that just a normal daily SmartBlock, one of the ones that you had previously before you kind of put it into this?
Yeah, actually, I already had it. So I think the standard value. Sorry?
Like a standard template or something you could have run with an XX or something.
Yeah. So the workflow name here, and I should here. So the workflow name used to automatically trigger on each day's daily note page. So if I go to 42 SmartBlock, that is the old indicator for trigger. So as you can see here, I have a few, and one of the templates I have is the daily template. So that is just a template I set up. I think in the SmartBlocks configuration, it will put in here automatically daily. I'm not sure, just need to check. You can just change it. You can say, oh, any workflow that needs to be triggered. If I just wanted to, I don't know, if I just wanted to have this one journaling prompts to show every day, I'll just put in journaling prompt here without the hashtag. So just make sure. So without the 42 SmartBlock.
Would you put a comma between them? Or how would that work?
No, you cannot. No, you cannot. you cannot. The thing is, you cannot run several workflows at once with this, but there's a but. You can nest commands within a workflow that will then run automatically. Yeah. You would need to look in the documentation. Like, I'm blanking on the command, but there is a command to actually run. Yeah. So you would define one single workflow, but within that single workflow, you have other workflows embedded. Personally, I prefer to have it. I just prefer to have it with buttons, because before I would just pollute my graph way too much. All right, let's see what other questions are there. Okay. Yeah, Alex, you had a very, very specific question about extracting tweets automatically. If you can use, let's say, if you're proficient with JavaScript, you can actually build this. If you want, I can connect you with some people who might be interested in building this SmartBlock with you, or may already have built something. I think Fabrice Gallet, if I pronounce his name correctly, looking up on Twitter, he has created a SmartBlock that extracts, basically tweets that you put in. So maybe he can also help you with setting up some filtering around it. All right. I think there are no other questions. I do see Nikki posted her answers. So
that's not for today. That was for you to take away, and like you said,
yeah, I will. All right, then we're at the end. Sorry that we went a little bit over time. I know we only built one workflow, but I hope that I've helped you on your way. Like this was, I wasn't prepared for this. So there was basically how I go over designing workflows. So I go look at the documentation, try something out. And like today, sometimes I'm halfway through and I think, shit, I actually need to do something differently, or I am browsing like that little auto completion of the commands, and I see suddenly a command that I think, hey, this looks interesting. Sometimes you have to start over from scratch, but I've noticed that by building these workflows, just trying things out, you also start to understand your workflows a little bit better, and you start to spot maybe steps that might be superfluous that you think, oh, this can be done way easier, or it's not even necessary if I just change my input a little bit. So hopefully this helps. I will be editing the recording. We'll be on Roam Stack shortly, hopefully later this week. If there are no more questions, I wish you all a very useful, Ramsey. Nice day.
I think even just the trick of having open the documentation and using Control F. I mean, I'd never have thought of that. So thank you very much.
Great to hear that, and you're welcome. And thank you for challenging me to build this.
No, thank you. It's instantly gone into my graph.
Great. If you like these sessions, there's another session planned at the end of October. So I'm planning to do these build sessions once a month. This format, based on your questions, I will do a little bit of a talk before. Hopefully next time a little bit shorter, so we can build more workflows. So head over to Roam Stack, and there is a post called October 2021 Events Calendar. So you know what? Why not make it easier and just put the link in the chat? That's always easier. So this one. You do need to be a member, but a free member is enough. So if you cannot read it, just put your email address in. You get a login link, and You'll also receive the weekly RoamStack newsletter. So win-win, I think. All right. Thank you all. And hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.